The principal looked at me, looked at Mr. Dawson, and then looked back at the printed grade book I'd slammed on his desk. And I watched the exact moment he realized one of his teachers had been lying to a student's face for 6 weeks straight. Let me rewind. My name's Jordan, I'm 17, and at the time this happened, I was a junior at a mid-sized public high school in Ohio, the kind of school where everybody knows everybody's business whether you want them to or not. I was a solid student. Not valedictorian material, not trying to be, but I worked hard. I stayed up late studying, I turned things in on time. And I genuinely cared about doing well because my family didn't have the money to just throw at some private college. I needed scholarships, or at least a GPA that didn't make admissions officers laugh. So school wasn't just school for me. It was the plan. It was the whole entire plan. Mr. Dawson was my APUS history teacher. He'd been at our school for maybe 3 years, which made him newer than most of the staff but not brand new. He was one of those teachers that half the students loved and half the students couldn't stand. The ones who loved him thought he was laid back and funny. He'd crack jokes during lectures, let people eat in class, play music while we did independent work. But the ones who didn't like him, and I was starting to become one of them, noticed something else. He played favorites. Hard. If he liked you, you could turn in a mediocre essay and somehow pull a 92. If he didn't like you, it felt like nothing you did was ever quite enough. And I don't think he liked me. I couldn't even tell you exactly why. I wasn't rude to him, I didn't cause problems. But sometimes a teacher just picks someone to be cold toward, and that was me. He'd skip over my raised hand, give one-word feedback on essays I spent hours writing, and he had this way of looking slightly past me when I talked, like I was a window he was trying to see through. The thing is, this pattern didn't start overnight. First semester, everything was fine. I had a solid A- going into winter break, but second semester, something shifted. Mr. Dawson started grading my work differently, and I mean that literally. I'd compare my essays to my friend Priya's, we'd study together, outline together, sometimes even proofread each other's drafts. Our writing was genuinely similar in quality, but she'd get an 88 and I'd get a 79. She'd get full credit on a short answer, and I'd lose 3 points for what he wrote was lack of specificity, even though I had more specific dates and names than she did. I told myself I was being paranoid. Teachers don't just tank your grade for no reason, right? That's not a thing normal adults do. But it kept happening. Every week my grade slipped a little more, and every week the feedback got vaguer. Needs more depth. Unclear argument. See me if you have questions. I went to see him once during office hours, and he basically told me I needed to step it up without telling me what that actually meant. I left feeling stupid, which I think was the point. Then the midterm happened, and that's when everything blew up. I studied for that midterm like my life depended on it. Flashcards, timelines, practice essays, the works. Priya and I did a full study weekend, 12 hours over Saturday and Sunday. I walked into that exam feeling more prepared than I had for any test in my life. The multiple choice section felt easy. The short answers were specific topics I'd reviewed. And the essay prompt was basically a version of a question I'd already practiced. I left that classroom genuinely thinking I'd aced it. When the grades came back the following Friday, Mr. Dawson handed back papers face down, which he always did. I flipped mine over and saw a 71. A 71. On a test I knew I had nailed. My stomach dropped. I actually felt dizzy for a second, like the room tilted. I looked at the essay section. He'd given me a 55 out of 80. His comment said disorganized, thesis unclear, does not address the prompt adequately. I read my essay again right there at my desk. My thesis was in the first paragraph. I addressed every part of the prompt. I had specific evidence, specific dates, specific names. I looked over at Priya, who was smiling at her paper. She got an 89. After class, I asked if I could see her essay, and she let me because that's the kind of friend she is. Her essay was good, genuinely good, but mine was too. Honestly, reading them side by side, mine was more detailed. She had 3 pieces of evidence per body paragraph. I had 4. Her thesis was clean but simple. Mine was more complex. And she got an 89 and I got a 55 on the essay. I stood in that hallway holding both papers, and something clicked in my brain like a lock turning. This wasn't me being paranoid. This was real. He was doing this on purpose. I looked at Priya and said, I need to take a picture of your essay. She just nodded because she saw it too. That night I did something that I know some people would say was too much, and maybe it was, but I couldn't stop. I went through every single graded assignment I'd gotten back that semester. Every essay, every short answer quiz, every document analysis. I laid them out on my bedroom floor and I photographed all of them. Then I pulled up the online gradebook. Our school used this portal where you could see your scores, but not the rubric or the teacher's comments, and I screenshotted every single entry. And that's when I noticed something that made my blood go cold. 3 of my assignment scores in the online portal didn't match the scores written on my physical papers. One quiz I'd gotten an 82 on was entered as a 74. A homework assignment marked 88 was entered as an 80. And a short essay I'd received a B plus on, which should have been around 87 or 88, was logged as a 79. He wasn't just grading me harshly. He was changing my scores after he handed them back. I called Priya and I think my voice was shaking because she immediately said, "What happened?" I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time and then she said something I didn't expect. She said, "Jordan, you have to go to the principal. Not to Dawson. Straight to the principal. If you go to Dawson first, he'll just change the portal to match the papers and you'll have nothing." She was right. I knew she was right. But going to the principal felt massive. Like a grenade I couldn't unpull the pin on. What if I was wrong? What if there was some explanation I wasn't seeing? What if I ruined this man's career over a glitch in the system? I barely slept that night. But by morning, I'd made my decision. I printed out the screenshots. I put the photograph papers in a folder. And I walked into Principal Alvarez's office before first period. I sat in that office with my folder and my shaking hands and I laid it all out. Every paper, every screenshot, the side-by-side with Priya's essay. Principal Alvarez didn't say much at first. He just looked through everything slowly, flipping pages, comparing numbers. Then he picked up his phone and asked his secretary to pull Mr. Dawson out of first period. The next 20 minutes were the most uncomfortable of my life. Mr. Dawson walked in, saw me sitting there. And his face did this thing. It went from confused to annoyed to something tighter, something controlled, in about 2 seconds. Principal Alvarez showed him the discrepancies between the physical papers and the gradebook, and Mr. Dawson said, and I will never forget this, he said, "I sometimes adjust scores after further review. It's within my discretion as the teacher." He said it so calmly, like it was the most normal thing in the world to change a student's grades downward without telling them. Alvarez asked him why my scores were the only ones that had been adjusted. Dawson didn't have an answer for that. He said he'd need to review his records. Alvarez said he'd be doing his own review and that Mr. Dawson should expect a follow-up from the assistant superintendent's office. Then he sent Dawson out. After Dawson left, Alvarez looked at me and said, "You did the right thing bringing this to me. I'm going to make this right." And I believed him. But here's the thing nobody warns you about when you do the right thing. The right thing doesn't stay in the principal's office. By lunchtime, the entire school knew. I don't know who talked. Maybe Dawson's first period kids saw him get pulled out and started asking questions. Maybe someone in the front office overheard. Maybe Priya told one person and that one person told everyone. But by noon, my phone was going off constantly. People I barely knew were texting me. "Is it true you got Dawson in trouble? Did Dawson really change your grades?" Yo, Jordan went to the principal. And it split down the middle. Some people were on my side. They said they'd always known Dawson was shady, always felt like his grading was inconsistent, always thought he played favorites. A few kids even came up to me in the hall and said they wanted to check their own grades now. But the other half, and this is the part that still hurts, the other half thought I was a snitch, that I was being dramatic, that I should have just talked to Dawson directly like a normal person instead of going over his head. One guy in my English class, Marcus, who was one of Dawson's favorites, said to my face, "You're gonna ruin a man's whole career because you can't handle getting a B?" I wanted to scream. It wasn't a B. It wasn't even honest. But how do you explain that to someone who's never had a teacher look through them? The group chat for our AP history class became a war zone. Half of it was people defending me, half was people defending Dawson, and I was sitting there watching people I thought were my friends say things like, "Jordan's always been kind of dramatic, and this is so unnecessary." Priya stayed solid. She backed me up publicly, told people she'd seen the essays side by side, told them the math didn't add up. But it cost her too. Dawson's fan club started calling her my sidekick and saying she was only helping because she wanted attention. I started eating lunch in the library. Not because I was scared, but because I was tired. Tired of being looked at. Tired of being a controversy. I had done something I believed was right, and it had turned me into the main character of a drama I never auditioned for. About a week later, the assistant superintendent's office finished their review. And here's where it gets wild. It wasn't just me. When they audited Dawson's gradebook across all his classes, they found discrepancies for 4 other students, all of whom happened to be students who'd either complained about him or challenged him in class. One was a girl who'd corrected him on a date during a lecture in front of everyone. Another was a kid who'd written a negative course evaluation the year before. He'd been adjusting their grades downward too, just not as aggressively as mine. And the reason mine was the worst? Priya eventually told me something she'd been holding back. Earlier that year, before the grading stuff started, Dawson had made a comment to another teacher in the hallway, and Priya had overheard it about how I had an attitude problem and thought I was smarter than everyone in the room. She hadn't told me at the time because she didn't want to upset me. But that was it. That was the whole reason. He didn't like that I was confident. He didn't like that I raised my hand and actually knew the answers. So he decided to put me in my place through the gradebook. Mr. Dawson is currently on administrative leave. My grades got corrected. Turns out my actual midterm score should have been around an 89, which is almost exactly what I thought I deserved. My GPA is back where it should be, but school is still weird. Some people act like I'm a hero. Some people still think I went too far, that I should have given him a chance to fix it himself before going to the administration. And honestly, some nights, lying in bed, I wonder about that too. I think about his face when he walked into that office and saw me sitting there. I think about the fact that he has a family. And then I think about the fact that he looked at my work, knew it was good, and chose to lie about it anyway, not once, but over and over again for weeks. So I'm asking you, was I wrong for going straight to the principal? Should I have confronted Dawson first and given him a chance to explain? Or would that have just given him a chance to cover his tracks? Because I genuinely don't know if I did this the right way, even if I did it for the right reasons. Tell me what you think.